Well, hello, DCO Nation. Welcome to Deadcom Outdoors Radio. This is the show where the tide set the tone and the bite tells the story. We're diving into everything saltwater inshore kayak fishing, from lures and locations to weather, water, and winning tactics. If it helps you hook up on more fish, we're talking about it right here. So grab your paddle, check your drag, and here we go. Well, welcome DCO Nation to Deadcom Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. And before we get to our guest today, I would like to invite you to follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, so that you never miss a show, you never miss a fishing update. Just search Deadcom Outdoors and we can get connected. So I'm going to keep the intro very short because when I have Captain Tanya on, we usually start chatting away and we kind of lose track of time. But Captain Tanya Dowdy is the owner-operator of Real Chica Charters in Charleston, South Carolina. And I really appreciate you jumping on here. I'm kind of tongue-tied here, but I appreciate you jumping on here. And we're going to talk November, late fall, early winter fishing. So how have you been?
I'm fantastic and love certainly doing the show with you, Chris. So thanks for having me back out again. I'll tell you, I wasn't really fishing today, but I did get to experience the full blown winter that Charleston got hit with. I was on the water this morning, and it was 30 degrees. It said it felt like it was 27. Wind was honking. I think we had a west northwest wind, so. I'm pretty certain the fish were probably in a little bit of shock this morning. Water temp was actually 57 degrees, so it was cold. But that gets me super excited because, when we get that water dropping below 60, the speckled trout start getting fired up.
So. Yeah, absolutely. I was in Charleston this past weekend for a redfish tournament, and I think I caught 6-8 trout on my pre-fishing day, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is the wrong species. They got to settle down here a little bit. But yeah, the trout are really starting to fire off right now. Yeah, absolutely. But the nation really has gotten their first real taste of winter. I know a lot of the northern states got snow. My parents in Illinois got snow. We got frost. As a matter of fact, I think the upstate of South Carolina ended up getting snow. And with these temperatures just kind of dipping down for a couple of days, I know this weekend it is supposed to warm back up, but this kind of 1 or 2 day cold front, what is this going to do to the fish?
It really can vary. Sometimes it shuts them down where they kind of get, the barometric pressure was really, really high today, and so we know those fish, aren't going to want to eat. But I can tell you, I didn't fish Sunday, but I had friends that actually fished Sunday, and we, that the pressure was down, and this front was coming in, and you just thought it was going to be off the chain, and the bite wasn't, which was kind of weird. So, I'm kind of hoping what may happen with this one is, they shut down a little early. We got that high pressure, and now that pressure is starting to fall, and by tomorrow it's going to be another, it's going to be cooler in the morning, but we've got a warming trend, and we're going to get back into that warm weather. So hopefully those fish are just going to get fired back up. What I've been seeing is there's lots and lots of shrimp around, which is awesome. Because that tells me, hey, we know that we need to start throwing those shrimp patterns probably more and more consistently. Those big baits have left. We're not seeing, a lot of the menhaden or the finger mullet. They really have transitioned out. A lot of kind of king size mullet are around, but we got to start thinking about those smaller baits. So, I again, it may take a few days here, but I would venture by the weekend, as we know things are warming, the bite should just get back. But I really hope, because we did dip below 60 degrees, that we know that that's that kind of trigger for the trout bite, like I mentioned. So I think getting out early for that top water bite is going to be just on fire with those trout. And I think that's what, I mean, we know the redfish are around. They're going to start schooling up, but right now they're still kind of like, are we schooling or are we not schooling? Because we've got this kind of wavy thing going on. But I definitely think we're going to see more and more of those trout starting to stack up in those places that we know once November, December hit, that we can just consistently find, those trout. And we know if we find those trout and you usually get one or two, those often spots can turn into 20, 30, 40 fish trip, fish just in that one area if you can key in on them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's stick with the trout for right now. Let's talk about them. So you talked about top water in the morning. When are you transitioning to a subsurface? And then what subsurface lures are you using to target those trout?
So, it kind of depends on what, kind of what overhead looks like. If I've got an overcast day, I'm going to be throwing that top water, obviously right at sun up, but I might go even a little bit longer with that, depending on what I'm seeing. Sometimes if I'm not getting any blow ups, even kind of as the sun's going up, I'll actually switch over, and have that rod already rigged with a subsurface, because you usually know within probably a dozen casts if you're going to get a blow up. You at least get a swing and a miss with a top water. You don't want to waste an hour and a half to 2 hours just pitching and getting nothing. So, if I'm not getting hit within, a dozen or so casts, it's time to switch down to that. And I like the mirror lures. I love to throw those little mirrodines. I think the 17 MRs are probably one of my favorites to throw. And I like things that look like they've got some great ones that came out that, that the skins, I still like to use those, the pinfish in the mullet. And then Rapala's also got some pretty cool ones that are very lifelike looking, as far as, the little mullet that are in the water. So those are kind of what I will kind of switch over to. And again, I've tried to be mindful of the trout as far as protecting their little soft mouth. So I like to try to use those single inline hooks when I can on both my top waters and my suspending baits, just so we're not macerating their mouths. I throw pretty much all my trout back just because, I like to catch them for fun and kiss them and put them back. So the last thing I want them to do is have a kind of a mangled lip and go back into the water. So if we can help that, I certainly try to be mindful of that. So, but switch over that suspending twitch bait. And, if that's not working, then I'm going to immediately go over to either a shrimp pattern or a jerk style bait. And that's typically, or even like a stick bait. And those three are going to be what I'd be throwing, and just trying to kind of see what those fish are going to hit. And it can vary. I mean, sometimes they'll key in on one specific bait. Like last year, I had a November trip. I was actually fishing by myself. And it was one of those trips where I literally caught probably in, I think, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 60 plus trout on. Yeah. And I was throwing the Z-Man's Baller Z, that big Baller Z that they came out with last year. So that bait's got like a little ball on the end of it.
Love it.
And I mean, I just sat on both sides of the tide, the last couple hours. And then we had, just even as the water stopped moving, and then over into the next tide swing. I mean, it's just like the whole time these trout were stacked up. And that was the bait, that they wanted. I mean, I'd thrown shrimp, nothing. I threw a jerk bait. They didn't want that. But then I threw the Baller Z. It was just a little different, and wham. So, But those are typically the three styles that I'll move to when I'm fishing for the trout. So, and I can tell you what's going to be deadly. I've just but Z-Man just released the Prawn Star in the 2.5 inch.
Yeah.
And I mean, that little joker is wicked looking. Wicked. So I think that is going to crush stuff, especially with these water temps dropping like this. I'm also using their new loose body Prawn Star, and you can rig that weedless, And that has been like, I mean, I'm still catching slams right now on that. So, trout, redfish, flounder on that bait. So,
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Now on with your Baller Z, what kind of weight are you using? Real light, like 16th, 8th, something like that? Are you going light?
Honest, to keep things simple, a lot of times I stick with 3/16 ounce.
Okay.
I'm fishing anywhere from, foot of water to maybe 4, 5 feet of water, 6 feet of water. A lot of times, I will fish some ledges that maybe have a drop off with maybe like a 10 foot. And you can still as long as you don't have rip and current, you can still get that bait down far enough. Um, but that kind of is my go-to really with when I'm fishing most of the time. And I'll also use if I'm using maybe a smaller, maybe not the big Baller Z, but maybe a smaller stick bait, I might switch over to like one of the Ned rig style jig heads, and I'll fish a 1/5 ounce in that.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I'm using. So
Okay. What kind of areas are you looking at when you're targeting trout? I know I like corners with like a rip current coming through and working like the outer edge of that current rip right there. What kind of areas are you looking for when you're targeting trout?
yeah, so same things. I mean, I'm hoping maybe there's some like oysters, maybe somewhere near that, just because a lot of times they'll sit like, you know, they'll be on just the edges of it. So if you can, run your bait just across it or kind of behind it, they'll nail it. So I love to, if I know I've got grass with that rip and oysters are causing that rip, oh, that's a spot I want to stop and fish. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, and I can already think of a couple of areas in some of the fisheries that I fit. Murrells Inlet is one, and Pawleys Island is one, where I already know those areas. And as you're sitting there explaining, the grass point with the oyster, I'm like, okay, I know exactly the creek, that those trout are going to be hanging out in. So yeah, absolutely. But Captain Tanya, we're coming up to the end of the first segment. This has flown by. Guys, don't go anywhere. We're chatting with Captain Tanya Dowdy, and you're listening to Dead Calm Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. Well, welcome back, DCO Nation. You are listening to Dead Calm Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. And we are chatting with Captain Tanya Dowdy from Real Chica Charters down in Charleston, South Carolina. I say down in there because I'm in Myrtle Beach, so she is south of us and probably 1 or 2 degrees warmer. It's probably 35, and we're at 32 right now. So, but anyway, that first segment, we pretty much talked about trout fishing. I want to shift gears because it seems like everybody loves redfish during the winter time. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this next segment. Let's talk redfish and how they're being affected right now with this early onset of our first frost and first freeze.
Yeah, I think probably what's going to happen is, they're going to be. I mean, redfish bounce back pretty good, but when you get a substantial drop in temp like this, they're going to be looking for that water that is, going to be a little bit warmer. So my guess is they're going to probably, like if you're fishing maybe around a dock, you're going to want to find like if there's a hole, those fish are more than likely going to be laying up in that hole. Now, certainly on that low tide, as things get to warm up, those fish will start moving back up onto that mud because it's going to be nice and warm. And the thing that is going to happen is we are going to see them starting to think about schooling up. So, I'd already, when the temps were dropping some couple weeks ago, I was seeing more and more fish together. You're not just seeing like those ones and twos, but you were starting to see, some groups swimming by. So I think we may get a little bit of an early kind of school up. They may break up depending on what the water does, over the next week or so, because we've got a warming trend. But we might get a little sneak peek of, what we do see in December and January, when those waters really start getting cold. But I'll tell you, when I have found them and they're hungry, they're fired up.
Yeah.
And they definitely are keyed in on shrimp right now. That
Yeah.
is probably what their number one forage that I'm, in my experience, what I'm, using right now, catching them. So.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when they're feeding on shrimp, do you have to throw a shrimp pattern in there, or were they pretty much hit a paddle tail or whatever, kicker crab, just because they're so intensely feeding that they're just gonna vacuum up anything?
I think it really depends. I mean, when I go out, I try to tell myself, all right, don't, I start catching them on one bait and I'm like, okay, ooh, and it's like so hard to go, you know what? Let's just pick up something else and see. It's very hard. And I mean, I did it a couple weeks ago. Like I used the same profile the entire time I fished because I was like, I just want to see what all I catch on this. Um,
Right, right, right.
and so I mean, I do. Obviously, if you're using like a jerk style bait, it's very similar to a shrimp style. So, but I think if they're that fired up, you throw something in front of their face, and they know bait's getting scarce. I better eat what's in front of me.
Mhm.
They get pretty excited when they see their buddy, next to them jump on something. They want it too. So, I think if you've got the right conditions, you could probably throw just about anything. There's days where it's like, monkeys in a barrel. You can't go wrong. But I'm pretty, it's pretty hard for me not to be throwing something shrimp like, whether it be a jerk
Yeah.
style shrimp. And again, I, um, I, I can't help but talk about Z-Man just because I love their products.
Mhm. Yep.
It has been just phenomenal with these new profiles that they've come out with it in the last 2 years. I, I I can't find another product that I'm going to go, hey, I want to use this one instead, just because I just keep getting the wow factor is consistent. Uh,
Mhm.
when you can pitch a bait and it's going to hold up and just it keeps catching fish. That's why I tend to go for that. So I will say I know we're coming off, not to kind of season, but we just came off of these really really high tides.
Yeah.
It's just
Mhm.
dirty. I will just I'm finding that any of these like glow colors are working really really well right now.
Okay.
So if you've got anything, I'm sure pearl would work, but if it glows right now, that really has made the difference for me. I definitely have changed colors. I'm stick with the same pattern, but I've changed up colors, and glow has been across the board like money for the last couple of weeks.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And when I was down there fishing last weekend, Saturday, I was using the Redfish Magic, the spinner bait, and just adding that little extra flash because of how dirty the water was on Saturday around Sullivan's Island, which is where we were fishing. And I was like, I just want to give myself just that, get that little extra attention with that spinner bait. And I was using a small pearl. I took off the Redfish Magic paddle tail that it came with, and I put on a 3-inch Z-Man uh, minnows in pearl, and it worked great. I was catching everything from trout, flounder were hitting it. Redfish were hitting it. So yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the smaller patterns. I know you brought it up one time, but the smaller profiles, the Prawn Star. What else are you throwing with that smaller profile?
So I'm definitely reaching for the little small TRDs, with that little stick bait. I
Yeah.
like the salty Ned. That's an even smaller little shrimp. And then the slim swims, and I like to do they come typically in. You've got I think the 2-inch and the 3-inch, and I like to throw the 3-inch. I think just that little. I just feel like I can cast it a little bit better,
Yeah.
and it doesn't. I just feel like that little tiny 2-inch one just is not as I seem to not use it as much now. I like the 3-inch in that, but those little, they kind of mimic like a glass minnow. So and they're very shrimp like, I think, as well.
Yep.
So those are the slim swims can be killer to use
Yeah.
for for this from here on out through the winter.
Yeah, yeah. And I always keep this now. Those of you who are going to catch this on video on Spotify, I am showing a little pearl slim swim on an eighth of an ounce trout eye. And this caught my PB redfish. It was a 31-inch red on this little 2-inch, slim swim. And I keep it right here. This one's been retired because it's my PB. So I keep that right here just to remind me. And the old saying, elephants eat peanuts. That's it. And you hit it exactly right. They are keyed in on those little glass minnows and it mimics it perfectly. So yeah, absolutely. I love the slim swim. Love it.
Yeah, it's a great bait. And, we know when this water temp starts, it starts to fall consistently. The same thing happens. The summertime, we've got less oxygen. Those fish are going to be slow. Wintertime, it gets cold. They're not as aggressive. So it's like they're looking for those easy peasy meals.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when we're heading out on the weekend, which is when most of us are fishing, where should we kind of start looking? You talked about, warmer places. How do we kind of figure that out? Like first thing in the morning, or do we need to get up at the crack of dawn now and go first thing in the morning?
I mean, I would still, especially with the topwater bite being like it is, I would still consider getting up and getting out there and throwing that topwater. Low water, you're gonna more than likely get some reds on top water. That higher water, you're gonna get that trout bite. Sometimes I don't know that I honestly can't think if I've ever like caught trout and redfish on top water, like on the same bite. I'm sure it happens, but I don't know I really can't recall in my trips if we've done that. I think it's usually redfish or we're catching trout typically.
Okay.
But if you can, pick your tides, obviously, if you can wait for that kind of midday where you've got that kind of low, and then as that maybe low in the morning, and then that sun is able to shine and warm up everything. So you've got that incoming kind of mid morning. That's going to be a great time to get up there on the flats. The other thing that you can do is think about getting way, way back into these creeks, because those fish are going to go back into those areas way, way in the back and, getting those holes that are back there. So this is a great time to go exploring, especially because the water is going to be so much clearer. You can see and navigate and kind of maybe go in those scary places. You didn't want to take the boat in and, put those scratches on the gel coat.
Yeah.
But those would be places that I would be thinking about if you haven't.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah. And, and that's the kind of fishing that I love to do, being a kayak fisherman, getting way back, getting skinny, a foot or less of water is awesome. And that's where I love to do it. So, yeah. So you're talking about, the sun warming up the mud bottoms, low tide in the morning is like the perfect scenario. Well, let's flop that around. Let's say we're coming in, the last couple hours of high tide at like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. How would you adjust your day if you're totally opposite?
I'll be honest, it's really just kind of a matter of species. That low water, I'm targeting those reds. Typically,
Okay.
If I've got high water, I'm going to be targeting speckled trout.
Okay.
Those are kind of what I'm doing. So, and then the only other curveball to throw in is this is also like my favorite time I love fishing for sheepshead. So the sheepshead bite right now it's just getting better and better.
See, I wanted to talk about it, and I'm glad you brought it up. So we've only got a couple minutes to squeeze it in. So give me your best sheepshead tactics or whatever for this next minute and a half.
If you can get some fiddler crabs, great. If not, frozen cooked mussels really work just as well. And they can sometimes be more accessible to get. Although I think they're getting a little more popular in the grocery stores, might be running out these days because this is not a secret anymore. But just you got to find you some structure. But they are showing up in numbers, and the larger ones are seem to be in and around. This is like my favorite time of year to go out to the jetties and catch them. So you don't have to. I mean, if you can get to the near shore, you got a bigger boat. Yes. If not, even in my flats boat, I'll go out to the jetties and we'll just put a smack down on them.
Okay. And what kind of rig are you using?
So I'll either fish them under. I like to use like an adjustable float, and I use that oftentimes out at if I'm fishing the jetties, or I'm going to fish directly on the bottom, kind of pseudo Carolina rig style. I use split shots just because I can take them on and off, depending on how deep I'm fishing. And then I use a really small hook. So I'm using either like a number 1 or a number 2 Gorilla Light hook, or I'll even use like a number 2 circle hook. I've actually recently started using that, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work for the sheepshead, but man, it actually surprisingly has done well. The key is you need a much smaller hook than what you're using when you're targeting your redfish in your trout. So
yeah. Well, that's absolutely awesome. I'm glad you touched on sheepshead because I had that in my notes that I was looking at. I was hoping we were going to be able to at least touch on them, and I'm glad you brought that up. But I tell you what, time has flown by. This is it. We got to stop. So I really do appreciate you jumping on. Tell everybody where they can follow you, how they can book you for a trip if they're coming down to Charleston or in Charleston and they want to catch some fish.
Sure. Super easy to find. You can find me on Instagram as Real Chica. You can go to my website at realchicacharters.com. Probably the best way to get me is either to shoot me a text or send me an email. Certainly call me. I can't always grab the phone. So certainly, I will get back to you, but I love to get people out. I am super passionate. I love you guys, but I am super passionate about getting lady anglers out on the water, kids out on the water. I do a lot of couples. So, but just, I love to get folks out and, either, if you're a newbie or maybe you want to amp up your skills, I feel like I offer a little something different than the average bear. So, if you come to Charleston, look me up. Love to take you out.
Yeah. Guys, hit her up, follow her. She has just got a ton of knowledge. Every time you come on, Captain Tanya, I learn something. And that muscle thing with the sheepshead is awesome. So thanks again. I really do appreciate you jumping on. And guys, remember, conservation starts with you. Release a fish for someone else to enjoy. And you've been listening to Dead Calm Outdoors right here on the Outdoor Radio Network.